Hey, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Paranormal. I'm Kristi Brower with my co host, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
We're excited to be here with you today. We have a brand new 3-part series to share with you. But
Yes,
before we
we
get
do.
started with that, let's do our check in. Katie, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm well. You can see from my face, I've had a little sun. I have,
Got the
I,
raccoon eyes.
I've got the raccoon eyes. I end up with these every single summer, thanks to softball.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay. You know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything. So it's good. We are just, I feel like crazy busy and at the same time, not doing a lot. We're playing ball and staying home mostly, but that's taken up
Yeah.
enough time.
Yeah.
And we're still, hip deep in the Vallow case with new stuff all the time. So,
For
there'll
sure.
be something new from us on that soon. But,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like just, yeah, and researching a lot of cases. You guys have thrown some really interesting cases our way, some well
Yeah.
known ones, some that have like never been done, both. And we want to do them all justice. So, lots and lots of research and work and reading and thinking
Mm-hmm.
and all of that kind of, you know, what am I trying to say? All, researching and all that journalistic stuff. So it's
Yeah.
good.
It is. It's a lot of fun. And we certainly
Hmm.
appreciate those case suggestions and, keep them coming. Remember that we like to take cold cases. We don't take solved cases
Yeah.
because part of what we do is we do a read on it. What do we think happened?
Hmm.
And so remember that, but definitely send us your cases. We love
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
learn about them, and we certainly are going to enjoy producing them as well.
Hmm. The only solved cases that we'll probably ever take are ones that were solved under mysterious or sketchy circumstances that
Right.
maybe we
Possibly
want to
solved, but
revisit.
possibly not. Yeah,
Yeah.
questionable stuff for sure. For sure. Well, I'm doing well also. I had oral surgery on Monday, but I feel like I'm
Yeah, you did.
speaking great today and doing just fine. So, other than
Good.
that, I'm just enjoying summer. We had a
Yeah.
barbecue yesterday. It was beautiful. It's so nice to be able to be outside and yeah, doing the same. Not really other than like softball and
Hmm.
that's about it. Not really going anywhere.
No. No.
If you're
No.
listening to this in the future, that's because it's the COVID-19 period of history.
Yeah, and our area is exploding right now.
Yes, our area is exploding and it's scary. We're in Idaho, we're a very rural state.
Hmm.
So of course we are behind the curve as it's taken longer for the cases
Hmm.
to hit here. I mean, we've had them all along, but people don't live as close together, lots of small communities that are
Hmm.
separated. And so it's just taken longer, which has given people
Hmm.
a false sense of security that, hey, we're not going to really have a big problem. But no, we
Yeah.
definitely do. We have a huge problem. We just
Yeah,
broke
very
10,000
complacent
cases.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are only 1.7 million people in the entire state of
Yeah.
Idaho, if that gives
Yeah.
you some perspective.
Which
So,
we don't hate that. It's
no.
great. But yeah, people are very complacent or very defiant. And that's the
Yes.
biggest, very
Yeah.
defiant. They don't want to acknowledge that COVID is real. They don't want to wear a face mask, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we don't have to get into all of it, but
No.
people are.
Super fearful. I think just
Mhm.
if you don't admit that it's real, then you don't have to take responsibility for it. That's how it feels to
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
That by not acknowledging it, then you don't have to take responsibility for it, and that I think is very much about fear. And I get it. We've never lived through a global
Mhm.
pandemic before.
Yeah.
It is scary, but
Yeah, it is. I mean,
you
it
know
sucks. But yeah, anyway, we've all got to do our part. But yeah.
we do.
So yeah, me and mine too. Mostly
Yeah.
just staying home
No,
or
just doing what we
going
can
through a
to stay.
drive-through.
Yes. Yes. That too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are going to kick off a 3-part series here on True Crime Paranormal, and this is a case that is local to us, although it did hit the national news when it initially happened. It was just the
Mhm.
5-year anniversary of the missing toddler Deorr Kunz, and Deorr is would have been 2 at the time. He would
Mhm.
be 7 now. He has been missing for 5 years with
Mhm.
really no solid evidence at all about what's happened to him. And so we're going
Right.
to outline this case in a 3-part series. So this episode is about just the basics. What happened,
Mhm.
who, what, where, when, how, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
In our second segment, then we will go into the players in the case, how they, what they had to say when they were interrogated, the theories behind what's happened. We're going to go visit the campground where his family was when they reported him missing, which
Mhm.
is in a place called Ledor, which is
Mhm.
120 miles from where we are right now.
Mhm.
And we're going to go out there and visit so that we can show you some footage of the campsite in Ledor.
Uh-huh.
You'll get a feel for rural Idaho for sure.
Mhm.
And then
And the store
and
that,
the store, yes, there
was
was a store where some people witnessed members of his family stopping there.
mhm.
And then in our third episode, we will do a psychic read on what we feel happened to Deorr, what the real story is, and what we think is going to happen going forward. So
Mhm.
this case, I'm constantly watching myself in video. I don't know if you guys know this, but
You have a little alfalfa hair
I
back
do.
there.
When you video your show, you look at yourself the entire time. I
Mhm.
cannot fix it. Oh well. You video yourself the
I
whole
get
time. You're looking at yourself, and so it's very distracting. And at times, you notice that, oh, I have a piece of hair standing straight up, probably because of my headset. That's fantastic. So
Mhm.
anyway,
I
sorry
get
for
it.
the squirrel moment, but so that's the three
For me,
part
it's the
series. We're gonna.
eyebrows. Can't ever leave the eyebrows alone. I'm
Yeah,
tapping.
yeah.
They're happening right now. I cannot.
Mhm. Yep, I know. It's so
Look at
weird.
them.
It's weird to stare at yourself for an hour in on video, it really is.
Yeah.
But that's our three-part series on Deorr Kunz. We're going to outline the story of what happened today.
Mhm.
And then in our next episode, we will talk about the players, their interrogations,
Yep.
the investigation. We're going to go out to Ledor and show you the campsite. We're going to show you the store. And
Mhm.
then in the third installment, we're going to do a psychic read on this case and tell you what we feel has happened to Deorr Kunz and kind of what we think the resolution of it will be.
Yeah. This
So
case really set our area on fire.
it did. It definitely did.
Uh,
This was 5 years ago, but long before the Daybell Vallow case, but kind of a similar response in the
oh
community,
my
wouldn't you say?
Oh, well, just recently, it was the 5-year anniversary. There were some posts on local news about it, and all of the same old fights just flared up again.
Yep.
People that are absolutely certain the parents did it, they should be behind bars. This is just like the Casey Anthony case, and blah, blah, blah. And then the other people that are like, the parents are innocent. You guys need to get off of them, and you've destroyed their lives. And, because the parents of this case, they received many death threats. I
Hmm.
mean, they became very unsafe where we live because people were so sure that they were guilty.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, the court of public opinion, is, as always, is alive and well,
Yes.
and I'm
Well,
not saying they are or they aren't right now, but
mm,
man, it was inflammatory. It
yes,
was very heated.
very much so. It was just also something that dominated our news daily for a long period of time. There were billboards all over the community with the picture of Lil Deorr, 2 years old,
Mhm,
um, trying to help see if anybody had seen him or saw anything that might help.
mhm,
Of course, there have also been private investigators involved in this case, which may or may not have helped the situation. And we're going to talk about that as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Uh,
that
the,
were very, very loud in the public eye, very loud
yes.
in the press. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. So that this is a big story. You might have heard of it because
Mhm,
it certainly did hit the national news. It's pretty quiet and pretty cold at this point,
mhm.
unfortunately. And it was one reason why we felt like maybe now would be a good time for us to cover it.
Yeah.
And it is
Well,
one
we
that
may
we have
make
talked
some of
about
our
for
locals
years.
mad because, you know, because everyone who lives here has an idea of what they think
Oh
happened.
yeah,
So,
everybody. You meet anybody on the street and you ask them what happened to Deorr Kunz, they're going to have an answer.
absolutely.
We're going to give you ours
So,
at the end of this, but
yeah.
in the third
So
segment.
if we offend you, we still love you. But
Yeah.
yep.
It's okay. We're going to give you what we get. With we have been working on and reading this case all along, as we do lots
Mhm,
of cases, just because that's kind of our thing.
mhm,
And so we've had an answer for a long time about what happened to this little boy. However, we've never shared it publicly before, so we will do that at the end. But let's start with the timeline.
yeah.
So all started on Friday, July 10th.
Yep.
On Friday, July 10th, Deorr Kunz Jr., which is the little boy, and his father, so they're both Deorr Kunz, his mother, his great grandfather, and a family friend traveled 120 miles from Idaho Falls to Timber Creek Campground in Ledor, Idaho.
Mhm.
So
Now they did live with the great-grandfather,
that's right. They did live with the great
and
grandfather.
the family friend was someone who, uh, the parents had never met before, Deorr's parents. He was
Hmm.
a friend of grandpa,
Yes.
um, and it's been said that that was a very or last-minute decision to take this little, camping trip,
Hmm.
at any rate, but yes, the family friend was somebody that nobody knew except for grandpa.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get into him a little more later. So
Yeah.
this is a very remote place. It's 2.5 hours from Idaho Falls, which is where I live.
Mhm.
So on that day at 2:28 p.m., Deorr's mother, her name is Jessica Mitchell, called 911 and reported that her son, Deorr, was missing.
Mhm.
And so, of course, search crews show up to look for this baby. Now, you have to understand that children going missing this time of year while camping is not that unusual. We live in a very rural area. We just had a little kid, I think in Utah, that went
Mhm.
missing and was like missing overnight, and they
Yeah.
found him. He wasn't two; he was older. But
Mhm.
kids going missing, kids falling in canals and lakes and rivers, and all kinds of things like that
Yeah.
happen this time of year where we live. Because if you live here, it's because you love to be outdoors and doing
Yeah.
outdoors kinds of things. And so
Yeah.
camping is a very common one, and being out in rural areas is very common.
Yes.
So on Saturday, July 11th, there were searchers out in the Ledor campground area on horseback, on ATVs, on foot, and in the water. So they had a very comprehensive search. They
Mhm.
focused on a 2.5 mile radius around that campground. They really didn't think that a 2-year old was going to get that far on their
Mhm.
own.
Yeah.
There was a big concern about the creek that was only 15 yards away from the campsite.
Mhm.
And this area has been searched many times. It has been searched with cadaver dogs. It has been searched from the air. It has been searched in every way you can possibly think of to search it. So has the creek. But they
Yeah.
did a huge search on Saturday, July 11th.
Yeah.
So on Sunday, July 12th, the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office, so that's the county of Ledor,
Uh-huh.
they had about 200 volunteers showing up to look for Deorr. Um, People referred to this as this 2-year-old baby just vanished. He just disappeared.
Mhm.
So about 200 people go out into the wilderness looking for him. Um, those efforts were suspended after not finding anything. They've found absolutely nothing. Not a track, not a scent from a dog, not a piece of clothing, a shoe, nothing.
Nothing. And a couple of things to note. So when he initially disappeared, his parents said that the friend had gone fishing,
Yes.
grandpa had gone in to lay down,
Hmm.
and that Jessica and Deorr Sr. had wanted to explore the campground and had told grandpa that he was in charge of little Deorr.
Yes.
Grandpa has always claimed that he never heard anyone tell him anything, but he was great grandpa and was quite deaf, and but so that's the initial synopsis of what happened.
Yeah.
They also had said that he was wearing cowboy boots that were much too big that he was clunking around in,
Hmm.
and they had really felt like he had a hard time keeping them on his feet, and they had felt like had he been drug away by an animal or something like that, likely he may have lost one or more of his boots, but no boots were
No
found.
boots
Nothing
were
was
ever
found.
found.
Yeah.
No. No, and yeah, the stories are interesting and at times conflicting
Mhm.
between the witnesses. Over time, things changed fairly significantly. But yeah,
As the
initially,
timing. Yeah.
yes, as is the timing. But they did initially indicate that they looked for him for nearly an hour, I think, before they called 911,
Mhm.
thinking that he may have just wandered off into the trees and that they would locate him. That's
Mhm.
that's the story that they've told.
Right.
Okay,
Initially. Yeah.
yeah, initially. Um, by Monday, July 13th, the parents are stating that they don't think that he's lost, but that they think he may have been abducted. And so there's a public plea for his safe return. And that evening there was a candlelight vigil here in Idaho Falls of about 200 people for his safe return. And so this shifted a little bit from a missing person to potentially an abduction for a while, although there was never any evidence at all that he was abducted. This was just something that came from the parents. So in the next few days, search efforts continue around the campground. They have dive crews go into the Stone River Reservoir, which is a quarter of a mile away from where they were camping. Seems really unlikely that a 2-year-old child in 2 big cowboy boots was going to make it a quarter of a mile on their own, but they did dive, and search in that reservoir for the baby. The parents remained in the campsite and helped with the search during that time. So then on July 16th, someone from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children arrived in Deorr. And so they're starting to treat this now as not just a lost child, but a truly missing child. National media starts covering the story, and that's when it hit the Nancy Grace show. This is why some of you may be familiar with this case. If you watch Nancy Grace, she did cover it shortly after. Shortly after he went missing. Well, about 7 days after he went missing. They did call in Bonneville County police and their dive team. That's Idaho Falls is Bonneville County. And they have a sonar robot to assist in the dive team and the search in the water. And they had crews on horseback in the hills around that campground. So huge search effort, multi-day search effort, lots of different ways of the search happening.
Well, and so many volunteers showing up to help.
So many, they had to start turning them away.
Yeah, they finally started telling people you're getting in our way.
Yeah, they really felt like at this point they needed professional searchers. Still find nothing. Absolutely no evidence whatsoever. Then on Saturday, July 18th, this is Deorr Sr.'s birthday. And he's still spending his time out there at the campground while they continue to search. And after, but at this point, the Timber Creek campground has been searched dozens of times. They have scoured the Stone Reservoir and the creek. They have found absolutely nothing. And, at this point, the search is basically over. I mean, they have searched everywhere they could search over and over and over again. And so for a long period of time, really not anything happens. At this point, then what happens is they really turn toward the family members, the parents, the great grandfather, and the friend to try to clarify their stories. And when that happens, things start to get a little dicey because they don't line up all that well. And one thing that they find is when they interviewed the parents, their story changed over time as well.
And Dad seems unwilling to let Mom speak. And continues to speak over her and contradict her, and that made investigators and people very uncomfortable, his behavior and hers.
They did go to a little store that's in Deorr near this campground, and they did find that there were people there who remembered seeing this family. They were in a white pickup truck. Is that correct? Wasn't it a white truck?
I believe so.
Anyway, there were witnesses that recalled seeing the adults, the parents of Deorr Kunz. No one from that store recalls seeing Deorr himself, which was another point of concern as far as this is concerned. But so when we go from here, we get into a lot of wild stuff that happens, none of which involves any more information, really, no more evidence of this child. When the parents were interviewed, they said that they believed that he had been abducted, except that no one ever saw another vehicle or another person. So there was no evidence that there'd been another person in the area that wasn't accounted for. They made this public plea to, if somebody has him, please don't hurt him and just bring him home safely. they, continued to say that they believe that he has been kidnapped, although there was no evidence of that at all.
Mhm.
Let's
Yeah.
see. So I want to read. This is what Deorr Kunz Sr. said about the situation on Friday prior to Deorr going missing. He says, "We decided we were going to do a little exploring. It's such a small area. That's what a lot of people don't understand. They just assume, how could you let your kid out of your sight? Well, this area is pretty well blocked in, and there's no way that you couldn't see him." The family said they searched for him for about 20 minutes before they called 911. And, the thing is, there was an immediate response of searchers
Yeah.
from the air, on ATVs, on horseback. Like, there was no, they came immediately. It's not like
Yeah.
there was time in between for someone to get away or for this child to
No.
get far away. That isn't the case.
Well, so understand that in rural areas like this, there are teams of people called search and rescue.
Yes.
And there's search and rescue in every area around here. Um, I believe every county has their own, or every area at least has their own search and rescue.
Hmm.
And search and rescue is basically just made up of civilians
Yeah.
and some law enforcement that team up together
Hmm.
to search. And so search and rescue was called out immediately, and many people answered the call and came. Yeah, right away.
Yeah, they did. They came very fast. And so there's not a lot of time, but again, we only have the family's report about when the child went missing. We don't
Hmm.
know really for sure what happened prior to that.
Hmm.
His mother, Jessica Mitchell, said he doesn't go anywhere without his blanket, his cup, or his monkey. Those were all three in the campground.
Hmm.
Um, they just continued to share his photo around for a long time. Everywhere you went, and every gas station you went, grocery stores, everywhere, there was a picture of Deorr Kunz everywhere. I mean,
Billboards
you could
everywhere.
not miss that child if you ran into him on the street for sure,
Yeah.
because there was such a huge response from the community looking for
Mhm.
him.
Oh
But
yeah.
the thing that's so puzzling about all of that is that at no point was there any evidence found of this child, his clothing, his shoes, nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing in the area was located.
Including tracking dogs and cadaver dogs.
Yes.
Couldn't
Who
pick
have
up
been out there
anything.
repeatedly,
Mhm.
repeatedly. I'm not sure how many times now. I've lost track of how many
Mhm.
times they have had tracking dogs and cadaver dogs out there in that
Mhm.
campground, but it's multiple times.
Well, and cadaver dogs did eventually find a bone,
Hmm.
and people were so elated, thinking maybe finally there was an answer here, there was something, and it turned out to be an animal bone.
Yes, yeah, and
And
that's
that
the
was
only
all
thing
they
they ever
found.
found. Yeah.
Mhm. All they
There's been a lot of talk about, was it potentially a big cat? Did a mountain lion take him? A bear?
Mhm.
A wolf? Even a coyote of a child that small? The thing that I have trouble with that is that no animal consumes 100% of a human body. I mean, I hate to
No.
be morbid, but it's true. They don't necessarily eat the bones, and there are parts of someone that would still remain that cadaver dogs would find.
Yeah.
Even if it was an animal that buries its kill, there's still something to be found.
Yeah.
Not to
Yeah.
mention that they don't consume clothing,
Right. Right.
and there's no clothing. There's nothing.
Nothing anywhere around. And of course, dogs were taken all over the area. They covered a wide berth of area,
Yeah.
and there was absolutely no blood evidence. There was no scent evidence. Nothing.
Yep.
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
When his grandmother said it's as if he just vanished, that's true.
Hmm.
Uh, as far as that area is concerned, there was nothing to find.
Yeah. Nothing to find. Over time, as you can imagine, with this child missing in a community that cares and wants to know, things started to get ugly, as we
Mhm.
know. Parents receiving threats. Eventually, the parents'
Mhm.
relationship ended,
Mhm.
and they separated from one another. And then there
Mhm.
was a lot of turning on each other that happened,
Mhm.
and some finger pointing, although never a clear story really,
No.
other than the story that's been given that clearly has never been able to be proven.
Yeah.
Um, I think there have been at least two private investigators involved. Is there more than that, or is it two?
I don't know. I
Okay.
know Klein Investigations.
Klein Investigations. I do believe there was one before that didn't go very far, and then they
Okay, that
switched.
may have been.
So Klein Investigations got involved, I don't know, quite a while after Deorr went missing. And Klein Investigations, for better or worse, they seem to have a very clear idea of what happened. And they've done a lot of finger pointing at the parents and a lot of pressure to the police and prosecutors in our area. The problem is they've done all of that with no evidence. There's no proof.
Well, and in January of 2016, they were named suspects.
Yes.
Jessica and Vernal.
That's
Vernal
right.
or Deorr.
Deorr.
Yeah. They were both named suspects, but that's as far as that ever went.
Right. Yeah. Beyond that, there's never been a charge of any kind. And so the private investigator, and we're going to get into the private investigator more in the next episode, but very interesting because they seem to have a very clear picture of what they think happened. The problem with that is that from a legal standpoint, you have to prove it. And that seems to be not possible at this point. There was some pressure in the media to get one parent to turn on another to tell the truth about what happened. That has not happened. Although there's been some nastiness and finger pointing, neither parent has turned on the other to say that something happened with one of them or the other. The great-grandfather died in 2019. So we have his statements, but he has passed away. So we cannot continue, asking him what's happened. The family friend gave a statement, and last I read has now declined to cooperate any further. So we will get into those statements and all of that in our next segment. But we just wanted to kind of hammer this out, break it down for you that this is what happened.
And as the private investigator, Klein, he was eventually fired by the family and then rehired by the community through some community funding.
Right. That's right. The money that raised the fund that raised the money for the billboards also raised money to rehire Klein Investigation.
So there was like a GoFundMe or something like that a lot of local people had dumped money into. And so, when they fired Klein, because essentially it looked like, that they fired Klein because he pointed the finger at them.
Yes, he did.
And so, which is what happened. And the public then, fundraised and rehired him. And we'll talk about that a lot more later, but there was a lot of contention there and a lot of challenges there. Klein did not work well with the FBI or with law enforcement in general. There was a lot of contention between them and ugliness in the press that is unfortunate because at the crux there was a missing baby, a missing child, and there was a lot of ego, that flew around.
It got really petty for a long time.
Yeah, really petty for sure. And in fact, Jessica and Deorr Sr., Vernal, I can't understand this. I guess he goes by both. Anyway, we'll call him Vernal because that's easier since there's, Deorr is also the name of the missing child. Right. So Vernal is the dad, Deorr's dad. So Jessica and Vernal actually did try to sue Philip Klein because of his behavior in this case. They tried to sue him 3 times. And lost every time. And the last case ended in October of 2019. So they've sued him 3 times over the years because of his behavior moving forward.
Yes. Well, I believe also Klein sued them because they haven't paid their bill.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of nastiness back and forth. This has kind of turned into this ugly litigation.
Instead of looking for a missing child.
Right. And for better or worse, Klein Investigations has said, we've given you our report, just because you don't like what we said doesn't mean we didn't do our job. But they have pointed the finger directly back at the parents. And there was a time, and I think this was back in 2016 when the parents were named suspects. There was a time when Klein Investigations released a statement that said that we should be watching as the public, and we should be watching for arrests, that they're imminent, except that they never happened. That never happened. There never seemed to be any actual evidence to arrest on. And I feel like one important thing to say in this particular case, because we've talked in the Daybell Vallow case about sometimes people's privilege gets them not prosecuted for something they've done, or a delayed prosecution, like in Chad Daybell's case.
Mhm.
We haven't felt like that was the case in this situation. It does
Yeah.
feel as though what really isn't there is evidence, that there's a lot of supposition,
Mhm.
that people got to have a lot of hunches, and maybe there's even some circumstantial stuff, but there's nothing solid enough that they can hang charges with.
Yeah.
And I've not seen anything that indicated to me that anyone was being protected or covered up or anything like that. It's
Mhm.
just that there is no evidence. This
Mhm.
kid literally vanished. There's, in that particular situation, and there is no evidence whatsoever to charge anyone of anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's awful. It's awful for it to be
Mhm.
left open-ended this long, 5 years. I can't imagine being the family of this little boy. I know we've seen his grandmother in the news a lot,
Mhm.
representing the family and about how painful and difficult this is for them.
Yeah.
In East Idaho News, in their news article about the 5-year anniversary, they posted a picture that is an age progression photo of what he would look like now, because he would
Mhm.
be 7,
Yeah.
which, I mean, you think about how much a child changes from age 2 to age 7. It's
Mhm.
shocking, really,
Mhm.
to look at the photo, because there are family members who hold out hope that he is living.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
you know, there's no evidence to say one way or the other, unfortunately.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's another hitch in the case. Ryan Wand, a gentleman that he was the friend, a guy
The
by the
friend.
last name of Ryan Wand.
Yeah.
He's never been named a person of interest, but he's
Right.
the only person whose story has remained consistent since the initial reports were filed.
Yeah.
The only one. He's the only person that hasn't changed his story several times. Mom
Yeah.
and dad did repeatedly. It also should be noted that the parents did fail polygraphs.
They did. That's right.
Grandpa died last summer.
Yep.
And so whatever he did or didn't know is gone with him.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing there. And at any rate, there's just a lot of information we don't have. But again, yes, there's a lot of information that we are lacking. Now, law enforcement had initially said that dogs hadn't found anything, but Klein says that their dogs did find human blood. And that's been an inconsistency in this case because law enforcement has never acquiesced to that the dogs found anything. It has been their report that there was nothing. But Klein investigations have claimed that with their own searchers, because what happened is that they brought in their own searchers because they felt like law enforcement wasn't being honest with them and wasn't doing a good job. So they claimed that their searchers did find that cadaver dogs did hit on 5 different locations, including a site 3/4 of a mile from the campground, and that may have been a holding site for some type of human body. Again, law enforcement denies it. They say that that's not true. They didn't find anything of the like, but this is what Klein investigation said. It's just another inconsistency in the case,
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest problem with this case is that the investigations on this case have been very conflicting from law enforcement to the private investigator.
The thing is, if they literally found blood, Deorr's parents could have been tested and they could have identified if that was Deorr's blood or not. That
Right.
would have come out years ago.
Right.
I really question, because, you go out into a very rural place in Idaho and you release cadaver dogs, and are they going to find stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Does it mean it's human unless it's actually been tested and proven to be human? No, it doesn't. This is a very rural place. We have a lot of predators. You're going to find blood. You're going to find, potential decomposition. But does that mean it's human? And does that mean it's this child?
Right.
No. And so I do question, like, okay, yeah, anywhere in the wilderness here, you send cadaver dogs out. Are they going to find evidence of some kind of a body?
Right.
Yeah. But without testing, you don't know what kind of body that was. Was it a human or an animal? How long has it been there? There's a
Mhm.
lot that just making blanket statements like that from Klein, I think is
Mhm.
irresponsible, because if they don't actually have the testing to back it up, it doesn't mean
Right.
anything.
And that's why the parents have sued him 3 times, because he
Right.
has put out all of these statements claiming things that law enforcement won't back up and muddying the waters.
Right. Yeah. And that saga continues. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know what the resolution with Klein investigations will be, but it has sort
Yeah.
of turned the tide on the story about Deorr away from
Mhm.
this missing child, which is unfortunate, and that we want to
Uh-huh.
shift it back to that place of this is about
Mhm.
a missing 2-year-old child.
Yeah. Totally.
He deserves
Totally.
justice. His family deserves justice.
Mhm.
The community deserves to know what happened to this kid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's where it's at
Yeah,
currently.
that is. And that's where we'll leave it for today.
Mhm.
In our next episode, we will visit the campground out in Ledor.
Mhm.
We're going to take some film out there and we're going to
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the location. I think it will help a lot to be able to see the location to better understand this story.
Yeah.
And to
Definitely.
better understand, if you don't live in a rural place like we do, you might not understand what it looks like, because you hear the word
Mhm.
campground. This is not a KOA. This
Right.
is this is a
No.
place out in this is a clearing in the trees with a fire pit. I mean,
Right.
that's the kind of
Right.
campgrounds that we live around. So we'll
Mhm.
we'll go out there and we'll share that with you, and we'll
Mhm.
share some more about the specific interviews with
Mhm.
Jessica, Vernal, great grandpa, and Reinhardt.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we'll talk about what they've said happened, and we're going
Yeah.
to talk a little bit about how some of their stories have changed,
Mhm.
and we'll go a little deeper. So
Yeah. Yep. That's where it's at. This
it
is a
is.
it is a case that again has a lot of twists and turns and winding roads, and
It is.
we will untangle them to the best of our abilities.
We certainly will. We certainly will. So thank you for tuning in today here on True Crime Paranormal. I'm Kristi Brower here with my co-host Katie Weaver. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.